Have you ever felt like you were losing your faith? Maybe you're feeling it right now. Well, that is what we're talking about in this message in minutes. If you feel like you're losing your faith, my guess is it is not because you woke up one day and decided to walk away, but because something just started feeling wrong. Maybe you were experiencing suffering that made no sense. You couldn't understand where God was in the middle of it all, so it caused you to start losing faith. Or maybe it was watching the church get tangled up in politics, or watching one more leader you trusted turn out to be untrustworthy. Maybe it was being hurt or judged or mistreated by people who claim to follow Jesus. It didn't happen immediately, but over time, you probably experienced things that caused you to disengage, to draw back, or to walk away because you were disappointed, you were disillusioned, and you were discouraged by it all. And now you find yourself feeling like you're losing faith, that God's just not as personal anymore. But you don't know what to do about it. Well, in this episode, we're starting a brand new series just for you called Losing Religion. And we're going to explore a new way to capture or recapture a faith that makes your relationship with Jesus personal. Because here's what I know. Most of the things causing you to lose faith are things the church should lose. Most of the things causing you to lose faith are things Jesus told the church to lose a long time ago. In other words, what's causing you to disengage are things that you should never experience in a church. Many of those things are actually things Jesus came to confront and to stop. So why do people continue to experience things in churches that cause them to lose faith, to disengage, and to walk away? Well, to understand that, you first need to understand the religious world Jesus stepped into, because this is exactly why he came. Let me start by taking you back 3,350 years. The Jewish people have just been freed from 400 years of Egyptian slavery, and they're experiencing freedom for the first time in their lives. So to help them manage their freedom well as they become a nation, God gave them, through Moses, what came to be called the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Jewish scriptures, our Old Testament. So it's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And the purpose of the Torah was to teach this group of newly freed people how to become a healthy, functioning nation. Now, at the heart of the Torah is a covenant, a binding relational commitment God established between himself and the Jewish people. In essence, it was God's way of saying, hey, here's what I promise to always do for you no matter what. Now, here's what I'm inviting you to do with me. So when you read the Old Testament, you are reading both the covenant God made to those Jewish people as well as the history of their relationship with God. Now, fast forward to the time of Jesus, and everything at the heart of the Torah is being practiced at the Jerusalem temple, which is run by 2 groups of religious leaders, the Sadducees and the Pharisees. These religious leaders had distorted the purpose and practices of the Torah to the point that people couldn't easily connect with God or follow God because the religious leaders are trying to protect the power and the wealth and the position that they have. I mean, these are sacred men in their own eyes who control the sacred place and the sacred text. So, unless you know how to navigate the system, you are on the outside looking in. The intent of God's original design has been lost completely. This explains why when you read the accounts of Jesus' life, you find him challenging and criticizing these religious leaders over and over and over again. He was really harsh at times in his criticisms of them because he knew they were causing people to lose faith. They were causing people to become disengaged and disillusioned and discouraged to the point that they walked away. Because they assumed what some of us assume. They assume if people who represent God don't accept me, then there's no way God does either. So, on Jesus' final visit to Jerusalem before his crucifixion, he decides to send a message that he's putting an end to all of that. And he does it in a way that his followers would never forget. You find this story in Mark 11. Mark tells us Jesus entered Jerusalem. He went into the temple courts. That's there at the Jerusalem temple. He looked around at everything, but since it was already late, he went out to Bethany, which was a nearby village, with the 12, his disciples. Now, let me tell you what he saw when he looked around. He saw the religious leaders selling animals that people needed to make sacrifice, but they were selling them at an inflated price so the religious leaders could get rich. He saw the temple, which had its own currency, but there were money changers there in the temple who were charging excessive fees so they could line their pockets. And he saw people being taken advantage of in their efforts to connect with God. He sees it all happening, by the way, in an area of the Temple Mount known as the Court of the Gentiles. So this is where non-Jewish people were supposed to be able to come and connect with God. But now they have been pushed out by all this commercial activity designed around greed. So Jesus saw a temple model that was really busy with activity, but it was completely empty of authenticity. He saw a system that was creating barriers that was making it difficult for people to connect with God. But, and this is important, Jesus did not react when he saw it. He looks around at it, and then he goes back to stay in Bethany, where he spends the night and he sleeps on it. The next morning, he wakes up, he's going to return to Jerusalem, and he's going to address it. And this is where there's an unusual detour in the story. Mark says the next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus and his disciples, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. And then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples, Mark say, heard him say it. Now maybe you're going, wait a minute. You see a fig tree that doesn't have figs because it's not the season for figs, and you curse it so it never will have figs again? Seems like a big overreaction. Well, as is often the case, we are missing a little bit of cultural context here. Before fig trees get leaves, and before it's ever fig season, fig trees in that region will actually produce these really small edible figs that are like a preview of the main crop to come. So if you saw a fig tree like this that already had leaves on it, like Jesus did, you should be guaranteed, if you go look at it, to find some of these little figs, some fruit on it. But this tree, the one Jesus saw, it has a problem. There aren't any of these preview figs. It looks healthy, but it's actually not producing anything. And so Jesus curses it to die. Well, what's going on there? Well, throughout the Jewish scriptures, the fig tree was often referenced as a symbol of the Jewish people's spiritual condition and how well they were doing at connecting with God, how well they were following the invitations that God had given them in the Torah. So Jesus is actually using this fig tree as an object lesson. The tree represents this corrupt temple model that the religious leaders have developed, and Jesus is sending a message to his disciples that he's about to end the temple model. The old way of doing things is about to be done. He's about to do something brand new. And then he marches straight from that fig tree to make his point. Here's what happens next. Mark says, on reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and he began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. And he wouldn't allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations? But you made it a den of robbers." In other words, I'm cleaning out all the stuff that's gotten mixed in and mixed up with what God intended for this to be. I am here to introduce something brand new. Now you can guess how the religious leaders felt about it. The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this, and they began looking for a way to kill Jesus, for they feared him, because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. Because Jesus wasn't just challenging their system. He wasn't there trying to make that temple model better. Everybody in the crowd realized, all the religious leaders realized, his goal was to replace the temple model entirely. Well, meanwhile, Jesus heads back to Bethany to spend the night. The next morning, he and his disciples start heading into Jerusalem again, when the disciples are astonished to see this. Mark says, in the morning, as they went along, they saw a fig tree withered from the roots. Jesus had sent the message that the temple model is dead. I'm replacing it. It's a new day. I'm introducing a new way to connect with God personally. So during this series, we're going to explore that new way that Jesus introduced. But here's what I don't want you to miss. Jesus did not come to make religion better. He came to remove religion altogether. He came to remove anything that makes it harder for you to have a personal relationship with him. So here's my question for you. If Jesus did an audit of everything that you believe, of everything as part of your faith, what do you think he might throw out? What would he get rid of? What is it that you're carrying with you that he would say, no, I want you to let go of that. That's not true. That's not for you. Things like maybe the belief that you have where you constantly feel a pressure to perform for God's approval. You never feel quite good enough. Maybe it's beliefs like you need to read your Bible more and you need to pray more and you need to come to church more because that's how you know you're good with Jesus. And so you're doing it for that reason, not because you want to connect with him more personally. Maybe it's beliefs like you got to get your life together before you can come back to Jesus, that he won't love you until you prove you've changed. Or beliefs like, you can't ask questions, you can't have doubts, that's a sign of weak faith. Or beliefs like, if something bad happens to you, well, God must be punishing you. Or maybe you're carrying beliefs like, if you pray and your prayer doesn't get answered, it's got to be your fault. You didn't have enough faith. You weren't living good enough for God to answer your prayer. Or maybe you've got beliefs like, God's clearly disappointed in you. Or like, good Christians are always fine. Everything's fine. You don't have to be honest about your struggles. You shouldn't be, because good Christians don't struggle. Maybe you're carrying beliefs like, guilt is the only way I really grow spiritually. God's kindness and His grace, that couldn't possibly lead me to change and grow. I should always feel guilty and bad about where I stand with God. That's how I know I'm doing it right. Or maybe you've got a belief like, if I surrender to God, He's going to ask me to do some extreme things. I can't really trust Him to have my best interest in mind. Listen, those are all distorted temple model ways of thinking. They've gotten mixed in with the new Jesus came to do. And I'm not blaming you. It's not your fault. You didn't know any different, because that's probably what you were taught. Those are beliefs that have been presented to you. But things like that can cause you to slowly lose faith. And the great news is, you don't have to. You don't have to disengage. You don't have to walk away. You don't have to lose your faith. Instead, you can lose your baggage. You can lose those untrue beliefs. You can let go of the old that's been mixed in with the new. You can lose your religion and pursue a personal relationship that Jesus wants with you. He will not make the religion you've been given better. He will remove it altogether, and He will give you a better way. So, where are you holding on to religious beliefs? Where are you holding on to religious practices that people told you are true, but in reality they are barriers Jesus came to remove for you? I'll say it again. Most of the things causing you to lose faith are things the church should lose. Most of the things causing you to lose faith are things Jesus told the church to lose a long time ago. It is time to be out with the old. So over the next few episodes, we're going to discover the new that Jesus introduced for me and you. Because once you see it, you will never see a reason to lose faith again.